For years, the country of Mexico has been plagued by mind-blowing levels of violent crime, a large part of which can be credited to organized crime groups, known for trafficking drugs such as meth, cocaine, and marijuana within Mexico and even into the United States. These crime syndicates wield massive amounts of power. Typically, such cartels set the laws in the areas they operate using force, threats, and bribes to impose power on the people in their territories. So how do these syndicates maintain their illicit power despite the presence of a democratic government? The answer can be summed up in one word: corruption. You know what they say, money is power. And this couldn't be truer for these organized crime groups who are talented at using their wealth, most of which is gotten from their illegal sales of hard drugs, to corrupt key players in Mexican politics and even law enforcement. These officials are offered huge bribes, often running into hundreds of thousands and even millions of dollars. In exchange, they allow the cartels to carry out their illegal activities without any consequences by protecting the criminals, giving them useful information, and sometimes simply turning a blind eye to their trafficking and violence. The people of Mexico, tired of all the corruption among the country's leaders and the negative effects on the economy, were desperate for a solution. For more than 7 decades, they had been ruled by the Institutional Revolutionary Party, and under this system of government, Mexican officials were often paid off by cartels to make their illegal drug trade easier. In the year 2000, a ray of hope seemed to shine on the people of Mexico. A new president from a new party was elected. They expected that this new president, Vicente Fox, would bring in a new political climate which surely meant an end to corruption, or at the very least, a large reduction. To make their hope even stronger, Vicente Fox had a young protege who was passionate about fighting crime and bringing criminals to justice. In the eyes of most, this man would be someone quite comparable to a superhero, and his name was Genaro Garcia Luna. During his time in service to Mexico, Garcia did fight crime. He did oppose the actions of the cartels, and to an extent, Garcia lived up to the hopes that people had of him being a solution to the corruption and the reign of cartels. What Mexicans were yet to find out was that Garcia may have been under the payroll of one of the most powerful cartels at the time. All along, this superhero cop may have simply been playing a game with the Mexican people while getting himself rich through the very same corrupt activities he was supposed to be fighting. Genaro Garcia Luna was born on the 10th of July, 1968. He is an engineer with a degree in mechanical engineering from Mexico's Autonomous Metropolitan University. In 1989, he began his career in intelligence at the Center of National Security and Investigation, the now non-operational Mexican spy agency. Much later, in 2001, Garcia was appointed as the head of the Agencia Federal de Investigación, an investigative agency which had Garcia himself as the founder. In 2006, when a new president took office, Garcia Luna was promoted to become the Secretary of Public Security. In this high-ranking office, Garcia practically became the face of the government's war against drugs. During his time of service, he stood out as a cop who was different from the rest. Formerly, police chiefs or law enforcement agents in similar official positions as Garcia were handled with caution, especially by other agents from the United States Drug Enforcement Administration. Very often, such high-ranking law enforcement agents are found to be corrupt and working for one powerful drug cartel or the other. But with Garcia, this didn't seem to be the case. He was described as a jovial man who, according to a DEA agent, would help the DEA out with whatever assistance or personnel they needed. Garcia Luna tried to create an image of a revolutionary type of cop who was tech-savvy, transparent with the media, and would go to lengths to bring down corruption in the country. To an extent, he was able to successfully paint this image into the minds of the general populace. He got to work before 8 a.m., stayed late into the night, and generally seemed like the model dedicated civil servant. At one instance, he announced he was firing hundreds of federal police commanders in a passionate speech during which he was quoted saying, "In the fight against corruption, we won't give in to pressure." A few years back, when asked whether Mexico should consider making deals with cartels in an effort to reduce crime, Garcia had replied firmly, "We are obligated to confront crime. That is our job, that is our duty, and we will not consider a pact." But as time passed with Garcia in service, his facade seemed to not be holding up so well. Early December 2005, while Garcia was still head of the AFI, the agency conducted a raid on a ranch where kidnapped victims were being held. The leader of the kidnapping gang was also supposedly hiding out at the same ranch with his French girlfriend Florence Cassez. Garcia invited a television crew and reporters to record the raid. They were even allowed to interview the suspects. However, in a shocking turn of events, it was soon uncovered that the raid was completely staged. In fact, the actual raid had already taken place on the morning of the previous day at a completely different location. In an attempt to build his image and impress the media and Mexican citizens, Garcia had arranged for the raid to be staged for the public to witness live. The alleged kidnappers who had been detained the previous day during the raid were held illegally without being presented to the judge. What's more, one of the alleged kidnappers claimed he was even tortured while playing along during the staged raid. This was no doubt an embarrassing situation for Garcia, but his career moved on. Just 1 year after the incident, he received a promotion and became the Secretary of Public Security. But despite moving on with his career, Garcia's publicity stunt was one giant milestone in his fall from grace. He began losing public trust, and his image as the superhero cop started to become more difficult for him to maintain. People started to become suspicious of him. Well, that is, if they weren't already. From the get-go, not everyone was fooled by Garcia Luna's impeccable facade. A former DEA supervisory agent named Jack Riley described his encounters with Garcia, saying he found the cops' questions very invasive. But that wasn't all. Riley also said that some of the intelligence that his DEA team gathered was passed on to Garcia's team, and absolutely no actions were taken on the valuable pieces of information sent. This caused the DEA agent to naturally become suspicious of Garcia. Even some Mexican citizens found some parts of his life questionable. Garcia owned numerous luxury homes. According to official records, Garcia had millions of dollars to his name by the time he moved to the United States in 2012. His wealth was fishy because it should have been impossible for him to afford such luxury on a civil servant's salary. With Garcia unable to adequately explain the source of his wealth, people started to come up with possible explanations by themselves. While some accredited his luxury homes to inheritance, in a country like Mexico that was familiar with corrupt politicians accepting huge amounts of money as bribes from cartels, it kind of goes without saying that a lot of people would suspect this was the source of Garcia Luna's wealth as well. A prominent Mexican investigative journalist, Anabel Hernandez, went a step further than mere suspicion. In her book, Narcoland, The Mexican Drug Lords and Their Godfathers, the award-winning journalist linked Garcia Luna to some of Mexico's top drug lords, particularly the infamous Joaquin Guzman, who's more commonly known as El Chapo, the leader of the Sinaloa cartel. After her book was released in 2010, Anabel Hernandez filed complaints with the Human Rights Commission of Mexico, alleging that Garcia Luna had tried to get her killed. In 2012, the accusations of bribery against Garcia Luna once again resurfaced. This time, the source of these allegations was a notorious drug lord, Edgar Valdez Villarreal. According to Edgar, aka La Barbie, Garcia Luna had been on the payroll of drug cartels for about 10 years. Soon after this statement, the administration of the then president of Mexico dissolved the office of the Secretary of Public Security, Garcia Luna's office. Despite the various claims of foul play, no known investigation was held against Garcia. He moved to the United States, and all efforts by the press to contact the formerly attention-hungry politician proved futile. However, towards the end of 2013, Garcia broke his silence in a letter to Steve Forbes, the editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. This letter was in response to an article published by the magazine in which Garcia was listed among the top 10 most corrupt Mexicans of 2013. In his letter, Garcia maintained that the claims against him were lies and that it displayed a lack of journalistic accuracy. In an attempt to prove his integrity, Garcia went ahead to list the recognitions he had received from international organizations and world governments. The letter he sent to Steve Forbes was reprinted and shared on various Mexican media just hours after the letter was received. Despite this, the noise died down eventually. Garcia moved out of the spotlight and seemed to be in the clear for a couple of years. Then, in 2019, all of that changed. Garcia was arrested. The arrest took place on December 9th, 2019 in Dallas, Texas. Officials claimed that Garcia was working for the Sinaloa cartel, providing them with safe passage of their illegal drugs and with sensitive information about law enforcement activities, as well as information about rival gangs. Charges brought against him were 3 counts of conspiracy to traffic cocaine, as well as 1 count of making false statements because he had intentionally made 1 or more materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements concerning his criminal history. Garcia's arrest came as a shock. However, the shock was probably not because people saw Garcia as impeccable, but because people weren't expecting the government to take any action, considering that the favoritism shown towards the Sinaloa cartel was strikingly obvious to the public and the media. Even though they were the largest and richest cartel, very little action was taken against them by law enforcement. Also, an explosively shocking event had occurred, whose effect on the public may have dwarfed that of Garcia's arrest. The previous year, in 2018, a member of the Sinaloa cartel implicated Garcia in a court testimony. The witness was Jesus Rey Zambada, and the testimony was given during El Chapo's drug trafficking and murder trial. Zambada, who was not only a member of the notorious Sinaloa cartel, but was also one of the drug lord's closest cronies, testified that he had met with Garcia twice, and on both occasions, Zambada had bribed him with briefcases filled with about $3 million in cash. In his initial appearance in court after his arrest, Garcia did not enter a plea to the indictment, but at a later appearance, he pleaded not guilty. In July 2020, a new charge was added. He was accused of engaging in continuing criminal enterprise, which allowed the Sinaloa cartel to operate with impunity for over a decade. Prosecutors are also coming at him for placing other corrupt officials in positions of influence where they could aid the Sinaloa cartel. Once again, Garcia pleaded not guilty to these charges. Currently, Garcia Luna is one of the highest-ranking Mexican officials to be indicted in a U.S. court on drug trafficking charges. So far, his trial hasn't been concluded, but if found guilty of these charges, Garcia could face anywhere from 20 years to life in prison. So much for the superhero cop who once presented Mexico's best chance in decades to fight crime and free Mexico from the tyranny of criminal organizations. Don't forget to like this video and share it. And just so you don't miss out on new uploads, hit the subscribe button and turn on post notifications. Until next time.